The boy was born in the foothills of the Carpathians, where winters came early and the mountains hummed like old men telling forgotten tales. His name was András Szalai, the son of a Magyar blacksmith and a Ruthenian mother who sang lullabies in two tongues. Before the war, he had known only the heat of the forge, the temps of iron and smoke in his nostrils, and the quiet, stubborn rhythm of a village that belonged to no nation but the earth itself. The empire called it Hungary, but it was neither Hungary nor truly free, it was only home. There were no soldiers then, only farmhands and horses, oxen pulling ploughs through frostbitten soil, and women with red scarves bent over wells whispering. Gossip that echoed in the stone András grew up tall, with strong hands and a deep, quiet gaze that drank the world slowly. He had a younger sister, Rika, who followed him like a shadow and once told him he looked like a tree she could hide beneath when the wind came. His father taught him to hammer with patience, not anger. His mother, to listen more than speak. Life was hard, but in a way that felt earned, like something passed down through calloused palms. Then the Archduke died in Sarajevo, and everything changed. Men in crisp uniforms came with papers that bore the Emperor's seal and the village. Square echoed with words like duty and honor and the glory of Austria-Hungary. András, barely 19, was given a rifle and a uniform that didn't quite fit. His father said nothing the day he left, only pressed an old wooden cross into his son's palm, the kind that was made more by hand than by faith. His mother wept in the doorway. Rika did not wave. She just stared after him, lips sealed tight, as though sending her brother away might steal her own breath, too. The train to the front was filled with boys pretending to be men, singing loud songs to drown their terror. The fields blurred into forests, then into barbed wire and mud, as the machine of war consumed one world and spat out another. András was sent to the Western Front, some place in Belgium with a name he could never pronounce. The trenches were not trenches yet, only lines carved into earth too stubborn to die, filled with water and rats and the bitter smell of unwashed fear. The rain came and never left, soaking into his boots, his bones, even his dreams. The first time he saw a man die, it was a French boy barely 15, whose face was still more round than sharp. They found his body tangled in the wire one morning, blue-lipped and stiff, eyes staring at nothing. András didn't sleep that night. The war, it turned out, was not about flags or borders. It was about inches of land and minutes of breath. You killed not because you wanted to, but because you had to, because, if you didn't, you wouldn't see the next morning's light. He wrote home often, but never told them the truth. He told Rika about the camaraderie, the letters, the hot soup. He never wrote about the lice, or the screaming, or the way men stared blankly after a shell dropped. Their minds splintered into pieces no doctor could mend. He forged a world of safety with his pen, because to write the truth would be to destroy her hope, and that was one thing he could not bear to do. By December, the war had turned to frost. The trenches were no longer places, they were graves that had not yet been filled. András had stopped counting the days or the dead. He moved like a ghost through the muck, speaking little, doing what he was told. The men beside him changed faces too quickly for names. Some cried in their sleep, some stopped sleeping, some never woke at all. He watched a German soldier, only a few yards away, throw something small into the mud between them, a cigarette or a biscuit, he couldn't tell. They stared at each other for a moment, two sons of two empires who neither spoke each other's language nor wished to pull the trigger. Then the shelling resumed, and the moment broke like ice under a boot. missed Rika more than he missed food. Her letters came less often now, and when they did, the words were carefully arranged too carefully. He knew hunger when he read it. He knew fear between the lines. But what could he send her? Nothing. The war had eaten everything. One night, as the snow fell thick and soft, András watched a dog wander through the wire skinny mongrel, ribs sharp against its fur. It didn't bark, didn't run. It just looked at him, as if asking where all the people had gone. He fed it a piece of dried meat, and it licked his hand once before disappearing. In a world of steel and death, the touch of a creature without malice felt holy. On the night of December 23rd, the wind shifted. It blew softly from the enemy lines, carrying with it something other than gunpowder, something warmer, a melody, faint at first, barely a thread of sound against the silence between explosions, then stronger, a carol, unmistakable, still nahat, helig nahat, silent night, holy night. András lifted his head from the trench wall, his breath frosting before him. Others heard it too. One by one, helmets turned, rifles lowered. No orders were shouted, no whistles blown, only the singing, soft and slow, like it was being sung by men in churches instead of men in mud. Someone in András Jacob, the Polish boy with two wide eyes, began to hum along. Then another joined him. Then András, whose mother had taught him the hymn in a language half forgotten. His voice cracked on the high notes, rough with cold and disbelief. At dawn, the impossible happened. From the German trench, a white flag waved, not of surrender, but of peace. Just for today. A soldier climbed up, hands high, unarmed. He looked like any of them, thin, tired, barely more than a boy. On András's side, the lieutenant said, nothing, just gave a nod that meant, go, but don't be stupid. So they went. They climbed out of their graves and met in the killing field. No bullets, no screams, just boots crunching on snow and the wild, beating hearts of men who could hardly believe they were still alive. They exchanged tobacco, bread, buttons, chocolate, stories in broken languages, laughter that startled even the wind. András met a boy named Emil from Saxony. They mimed their hometowns with sticks in the snow. Emil had a photo of his fiancée in a cracked locket. András showed him a small carved horse Rika had made from birchwood. They buried the dead together, side by side, Austrian and French, Hungarian and German. No one knew who was who anymore. They sang again. They played football with a ball. Someone had stitched from rags and rope. Men who had tried to kill each other only hours ago now held one another's shoulders, if only to remember they were still human. But it couldn't last. Orders came down the line by the second day, sharp, hard voices reminding them of duty, of the enemy, of consequences. The truce was not sanctioned. It was treason to speak, to sing, to smile across the wire. One by one, men returned to their trenches. Some shook hands before parting. Some wept. Some couldn't speak at all. András looked once more across the frozen ground. Emil waved once, then vanished below the rim of the trench. The world had snapped back to war, but something in András had changed. He had seen the man beneath the uniform, the child behind the gun. He had tasted peace, not as a dream, but as a living thing. And now he knew what they were truly killing. After the truce dissolved into the silence of shame, the war returned with an anger that felt personal. Artillery screamed louder, as if punishing the ground for having dared to rest. Machine guns stuttered without mercy. New recruits were shoved into the trenches with eyes to clean for what they would soon see. András tried to keep his mind blank. He swung his bayonet when told. He filled sandbags. He wrapped a tourniquet around a boy who sobbed for his mother and died anyway. But the memory of the Christmas truce clung to him like smoke sweet and choking all at once. A week after the New Year, a storm of fire and steel shattered the northern line. Dozens of men were lost in the chaos, including Jacob, the boy who had once hummed Silent Night in the dark. They found pieces of him near a crater, his rosary beads tangled in a branch like a cruel decoration. The lieutenant barked for order. The sergeant kicked the dead to the side of the path. But András stared at the beads for a long time, until the snow covered them and made them part of the earth. That night, while scraping mud from his boots, he overheard two officers speaking in hushed tones. One German soldier had crossed the line during the truce and was caught later with a letter in his letter that praised the humanity of the enemy. High Command considered it treason. He was executed at dawn. András couldn't sleep. War had started with nations, but now it lived inside each man, his lungs, his fingers, his choices. He began to carry Emil's name in his mind like a shield. He didn't know why. Maybe because he needed something unbroken to hold on to. Maybe because he feared that if he let go of that one human face, he'd become no more than a shovel in someone else's hand. A few days later, while foraging for firewood near a burned-out barn beyond the trench line, András saw movement, a flash of grey darting between collapsed beams. He raised his rifle, breath shallow. Then he saw him, a German, unarmed, barely standing, covered in blood, one arm hanging loose like a torn banner. His face was sunken, but András recognized him. Emil. They locked eyes. No words, no time in that moment. András made a choice. He lowered his rifle, moved forward, tore a strip of cloth from his coat and pressed it to Emil's wound. The boy winced, but did not resist. There was no plan, no logic, only something primal and true. You saved what you could, when you could. Even in hell, he led Emil behind the barn, hidden from the road, gave him a crust of bread, covered him in straw. Emil tried to speak, but his voice was gravel. András shook his head. Don't speak, stay alive. It was nearly morning when he returned to his trench, cold, shaking, but oddly clear. He had done something the war could not explain. Something forbidden, something human. The next day, Emil was gone. 2 days passed, then 3. No one spoke of the boy András had hidden. No one asked why his hands shook in the morning or why he stared too long at the tree line. But war has eyes, even when no man is watching, and it remembers what should have stayed buried. On the 4th night, the lieutenant called him in. The dugout was dim and quiet, lit by a single oil lamp. Shadows danced along the walls like ghosts retelling old mistakes. The lieutenant was not cruel, only tired. His uniform was worn, his eyes older than the war. He held a letter in his hand, a German one, smeared with blood. Found near a field hospital, found with a name, Emil Lutz. He read aloud, his voice flat. A Saxon boy. Says he was helped by a Hungarian soldier. Describes the coat, the hands, the kindness. He looked up at András then, not accusing, not angry, just weary. Was it you? András said nothing. He could have lied, could have said no, could have cursed the Germans, could have spat and played the good soldier. But his mouth would not form the shape of betrayal. Not this time. He simply nodded once. The silence afterward was colder than snow. The lieutenant sighed and rubbed his forehead. "You know what this means," he said. "They'll ask questions. They'll expect action. If I say nothing, they'll think I'm weak. If I punish you, they'll think I'm just. Either way, we both lose." "I understand," András whispered. And he did. He had not expected a medal. He had not expected mercy. The next morning, he was assigned to a forward patrol. No one said the word punishment. They didn't need to. The fog was thick as death that day. 5 men went into the woods. Only 2 returned. One with shrapnel in his neck. One with blood on his boots and silence in his eyes. András never spoke of what happened in those trees, but afterward he walked with a limp that no doctor could name. Not from injury, from the weight of what he'd survived. They gave him no medal, no words, just another pair of boots to fill. That night he sat alone in the dugout, hands wrapped around a tin mug of nothing. He pulled out Rika's last letter, now creased and faded. It spoke of hunger, of cold, of the village losing. "It's young." Her words were careful, always careful, but he could hear the fear beneath them like a second heartbeat. She wrote, "Come home when the snow melts. We'll plant something again, even if it's just carrots." He wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry, but instead he reached into his pocket and pulled out the carved birchwood horseworn now, the edges dulled by war and time. He pressed it to his chest. He was not a hero. He had not saved 1,000 lives. He had not changed the war, but he had saved one. That had to mean something. It had to. And somewhere across the broken earth, Emil might still be alive, might be writing to his fiancée, might be whispering in another tongue the same prayer that András spoke that night. Alone in the dark, let me carry one good thing with me when all this ends. By the time the armistice came, the war had devoured nearly everything. Towns had no names, only coordinates. Forests were no longer forests, just stumps and ghosts. András was 23 when the guns finally went quiet, though he felt 100. His uniform no longer fit, his boots were more holes than leather, and he had not written a letter home in months. He didn't know what to say. He didn't even know who he was, any more only that he had lived, and others hadn't. The last shell he heard did not land. It flew overhead and vanished into silence, like a bird set free from a cage. And just like that, the world stopped screaming. He sat in the trench until the dusk turned blue, and then darker still. No one celebrated. Not really. A few men shouted, but it felt more like a question than a cheer. Others just stared into the sky, waiting for the trick, the lie, the bullet that hadn't gotten the message. When none came, they simply waited. When András finally rose, he walked without purpose. He wandered past the wire, past the frozen puddles that had once been blood, past the bodies buried too shallow for peace. He walked toward the woods, though he didn't know why, and there, just beyond the tree line, he found the barn again. It was burned still, broken and sagging under the weight of winter. But in its shelter, faint but real, was a mark carved into the beam, a crude drawing of a birchwood horse. He stood there a long time, eyes fixed on the childlike shape. Then he smiled not with joy, but with something gentler, proof. Emil had lived, had remembered, had left something behind. András returned home in the spring, walking most of the way. The empire that had once sent him to war no longer existed. Flags had changed, borders had shifted. His village was still there, though smaller now, quieter, like a place that breathed differently. His father had died the year before. His mother looked older than he remembered, but her arms were warm. Rika, taller, sat around to him and would not let go for a long time. He tried to speak of it once, the war, the men, the snow. But the words came out wrong, too heavy, too dry, so he said nothing. Only worked the forge again, slowly, as if remembering how to live. Sometimes, when the wind was still, he would sit beneath the tree where Rika once said he looked like shelter. He would take out the wooden horse, smoothed now from all the handling, and set it beside him on the grass. He never spoke to it. But sometimes he would imagine another man, somewhere across another field, doing the same, holding something small, remembering something true. And that was how the war ended. Not in parades, not in speeches, but in quiet moments between people who chose to remember kindness when the world forgot how. The scars never left. The dead were never truly gone. But there was still breath, still spring, still a forge and fire and the smell of iron. And in the silence where guns once ruled, András Szalai kept one good thing alive. That was enough. That had to be